Welcome to Parent Conversations, the first Monday in April. I'm getting so excited because it's getting warm outside and I love this time of year. We would like to welcome Tim Keady again from the USU Extension. He's continuing with our parenting series. This week we're going to talk about what to expect. It kind of leaves it wide open, but I'm sure we're going to talk about the developmental stages in our children. We want to give a shout out to the Bear River Health Department, the Davis County Health Department, and to Central Utah Public Health Department for helping us make parent conversations possible. As always, if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand, type in the chat. I am the moderator. I am Megan. I'm the assistant director with My Discovery Destination and the assistant with the Discovery Family Coalition. Check out our new site, our new website, discoveryfamilycoalition.com. We're so excited about that. And if you have any questions, just let us know. Tim, take it away.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Well, we're glad to have you guys here. Hopefully we can have a good conversation and learn some things together, and you guys can teach me as well as I can teach you a little bit of something, I hope. This has been a great opportunity, I think, to go over a number of different important ideas relating to our families and how we interact together. We know that by taking care of our families, we can actually have healthier, happier communities that are more successful. So for me, this helps us with a lot of different areas that I work with specifically. You guys, we've shown this before to some of you, some of the stuff that I do, working with our Hearts team. We have grants that take us across the state, some of them across the nation, to reduce opioid deaths and substance use disorder deaths, suicide deaths, trying to help our community be safer, a better, more inclusive environment for those that need that help. Strengthening families programs we do, life skills, homeless outreach, veterans outreach, and many coalitions that I'm a part of that keep me, I guess, rejuvenated and doing new things that I want to do. And having come to Utah, I found that there's great people here wanting to help others, so it's really a fun place to be. We do have people introduce themselves if they want to. If you like the people who are here want to introduce themselves, that would be great. So we just don't want to know what we should call you. So just a simple type of family structure. If you don't, that's fine too. Or don't want to talk about that, it's fine. Where you're from and what you hope to gain from attending. And if people could just do that really quick, that would be great.
Okay, I'll start.
Okay.
Everybody knows me because I kind of introduced myself, but where am I from originally? Grew up in Central California. I've lived in Utah half my life. Family structure. Right now, I am footloose and fancy free. It's just me. Single, empty nester, got 4 adult daughters, 5 grandchildren, and that's me. So I'm going to pass it off to Cheryl Lee. You get to go next.
Okay, well, actually, and I've done this before, so I'd love to just pass it on to Laurie. I'm going to pass it to Laurie.
Okay.
Sorry, my hands are messy. I'm the mother of 8. I grew up in Brigham. That's where we are now. My husband's from Montana. What else was I supposed to tell you, Tim?
What you hope to gain from attending, how about that?
Oh, just to be a better parent. I think parenting doesn't come with a manual, and there are so many differences in each of my kids, but I can't parent them the same way. I wish I could, but that's not possible.
Yeah, that's very good. That's really great that you're doing that. Thanks for being here.
So I'll pass it on to Catherine.
She may be typing in, I think, right? Sometimes.
Yeah, Catherine might have to find her mute button. Unmute button. Emily, if you're close to your mute button, why don't you go?
Hi, my name is Emily. We live in Davis County. We have 1 toddler and 1 child on the way. And I just love learning all the parenting tips. And since my kids are still young, I'm trying to incorporate them early. So this has been helpful.
Well, good. Thank you. Congratulations also.
Let's see, who else might we still have? Amanda, are you still on with us?
Yeah, I'm here. So I'm Amanda Wiggins. I have 3 children, 9, 7, and 5. I live in Murray in Salt Lake County, although I'm not from here by any means. I grew up around the world. And I'm here to support my team because I've just not been in the area the last few weeks. So here I am. I'm back.
And we are glad to have you back. I look
Yeah.
forward to hearing more about your trip.
Oh, for sure.
Yep. Okay, Catherine typed in the chat. She and her husband have 5 children. Their ages range from 7 months to 8 years. They're originally from Michigan and Minnesota and Provo, and she says she's looking to improve her parenting. Thanks,
Very cool.
Catherine.
Well, great. Well, thank you all for doing that. I should introduce myself. I'm Tim Keady. The family structure that I'm with is probably blended, grandparent, empty nesters, whatever you want to call it, lots of different things. I'm actually from upstate New York, and I hope to gain information from you. That's kind of fun to do these things. It's fun to be out talking with others that have different experiences and to learn from you, especially when we're talking about families and we know how, obviously I'm a little bit older now, but having been through that with working and raising children and having a great wife that helped me and doing cool things that allowed me to do things that I probably wouldn't have been able to do in my position that I had back east and with the university. I really appreciate what those caregivers do and what caregivers do, no matter what you call yourself. If you're taking care of children, you're doing amazing things. I think that's something that often doesn't get talked about enough. And especially, I'll even say the word, females do a lot of things that they don't always get credit for in all different ways. And I really appreciate females and males that take on that role also, or whatever your gender might be. I was Mr. Mom for one summer and learned lots of cool things. I mentioned this before, but it really was not easy. It was not an easy thing to do, coming from working, and I retired from a position, was able to stay home for a while with our children, try and do some cool things. And it was really pretty amazing that what you can do. I guess my big claim to fame is learning how to do I have 4 daughters also, learning how to do their hair. And being able to braid hair and use curling irons and all that, when obviously I'd never done that. So,
Oh, Tim, I am so bad at that. My kids had to learn for themselves out of self-preservation.
well, I wonder about that too myself, but they let me. I'm surprised they let me do it. They were very hesitant at first, but maybe because they were younger, they didn't know any better. They were really careful, but that was fun, something fun to do. So we still get people still laugh that I can braid hair. So
That's awesome.
I think kind of fun. Okay, so that's us a little bit. Last week's assignment, we did have people just talk. We was talking about this for people who were here. Maybe we wanted to try and do some family meetings if you could, taking turns, taking minutes, giving input, providing ideas, and talking. And beginning, I should say, with a positive action that occurred during the week. So that's something that we wanted to encourage people to try. I don't know if people had a chance to do that, but that's just something that we were going to remind people of doing again, having those weekly meetings. I know in this community, some people do on Monday nights, different nights they get together and talk about things and review things, and the actions that we want people just to be aware of as improving that communication and allowing everyone the opportunity to communicate. And obviously as a child, that helps the child be able to communicate later on in their lives, feel more comfortable with that self-esteem. All of that's what we want to do with that communication opportunity for them to do that on the weekly meeting. So whether you call it family meetings, whatever you want to call them, those are something that are good to do and that we've encouraged people to do kind of across the board with any family members. We even do it with people that may just have 2 people at home, or we even have single people that will actually tell us that they follow these kind of same principles and just keep track of what they're doing themselves so that they have a better grasp of their own week. So lots of opportunities there. So if anybody has an opportunity or had an opportunity to do it, that'd be great. Put some input, but if not, let's go to the next area. I'll give it just a moment. Or if you have any questions about that, you can ask questions too for a second. We'll go to the next one then. Okay, so today we're going to talk about some complex interactions. We're going to talk about human development, obviously. some basic human development information we're going to give you, go over some stuff. We got a whole bunch of crazy things I put on this presentation today, just to kind of give you opportunities to see things and look at what there is available out there, and some of the opportunities that there are for talking about different human development, how that works. I go a lot with Erickson. Eric Erickson is one of the people I work with a lot when I talk about this. A lot of kind of a Freudian studied professor that did this, but some of his information I think is still pretty pertinent, still pretty good. There's obviously a lot of other people that have done things with human development out there also. It's always being changed, and new information comes out about how to be better able to communicate information regarding human development back and forth between people. So that is a really interesting science to study if you're ever interested. So kind of cool stuff that goes on with this. Then we're going to talk about peer pressure a little bit also, how that interacts with this and how it relates to what we're doing here, talking about our objectives. Ground rules, again, same ground rules. You know all this: respect time, group persons, ideas, show compassion, share success if you see those, limit disclosure of sensitive topics, participate as you feel comfortable. The confidentiality of groups important. Again, just trying to keep things within our group if possible, and then spreading it out as you have the opportunity in a way that is meaningful to you and your family. Talking about things without using names and stuff is always helpful. Okay, we're on what we can expect, human development, with peer information also. Okay, I left this in here also because we also talked about creating SMART goals for the series. That's something we talked about doing in the past. I've had people talk about doing this, and we've had people who have tried doing this. I don't know if anybody's had an opportunity to do a super SMART goal that's been here. I know we got Megan and really a couple of people have been here. We don't want to pick on too much, and Cheryl Lee, but I just want you all to think about that, especially if people are watching it online again also. Some goals you can do for the series and for after the series. What are some things we can change using that super SMART goal kind of outline to do it? And part of that is the big thing for me with these goals, that it's different than some other areas we talk about, just SMART goals, are we want to be able to talk these out with someone. So it's public. So self-controllable, obviously we know that. Public is a big thing that we find different, that's helpful for people. You actually talk about what you're going to do out loud to others. So there's some accountability to those other people, whether family members, loved ones, people you know, friends, whatever. There's some accountability there, which we think is very important and actually encourages you to be more successful in your goals and be able to accomplish them. And having done this for many years with many different people, even down to students and actually professional staff of all different levels in education, it's been interesting to see the response that people have when they have to say something out loud. It really changes their perspective a little bit. Sometimes it makes them think more clearly about how they're going to do things. Instead of having grandiose ideas, for example, when we're talking about a SMART goal, it may be, you know, I want to be more successful. That might be a goal someone has, or I might be more successful in my education. That sounds great, but when you start thinking about how are you going to tell someone that in your group, you have to start thinking about where are you going to be more successful? How are you going to make that work? How are you going to measure success? I'm going to go with grades or something. Well, what we tell people to do is kind of make it a bit smaller goal that's more attainable. So instead of saying, I want to be successful in school, I want to do well on my, midterm exams or something like that. So it becomes more specific and measurable, so people can work towards those goals instead of just not talking about them after you write them. Many people write goals. We have all these great goals, but nobody does anything with them after. So trying to remember that, it's important also. You don't have to do anything, but if you have an opportunity, sitting down with your family, loved ones, whoever it might be, other caregivers, writing down your goals can become a very good experience. I'll tell some people sometimes it's not a really good experience sometimes if you don't get along with some things, or people have other ideas of what they would like to accomplish, even if they're your loved ones. So being patient and listening to each other becomes very important also. And so that's where the communication from last week comes in, being able to think clearly about what you want to do, what you want to accomplish with your loved one. So again, all of these, I hope, begin coming together for you. It allows you to think a little bit more clearly about what you want to accomplish as a group and as a family. Remember, we use family in general terms, mean anybody, when we're talking about family, any type of coordinated person or persons or individuals can make up a family. Okay. Human development introduction. Normal human development for individual and family success, what we're kind of talking about. Many of you guys have any ideas of how knowing a little more about human development can help with your family success? What do you think? Anybody have any ideas of what we're going to talk about, or what you think I should talk about?
Here, I'll say something. Sometimes when you know stages and you know that it's just a stage, I think it helps you to be a little bit more patient.
Okay, good. I like that. Thank you. I think that's something we find in many areas of life, I think, and especially with our working groups, as well as if you have family members. Patience becomes difficult at times because we want things to change. We want things to go things the way we want them to go. Kind of a strange thing I just said there, but we want things to be easy at times, and they're not always easy. Things are going to be difficult. And that's where I think the opportunity to learn more becomes very important. So to me, knowing about normal human development for individuals and for our families can help us to make better choices about what actions we take at a specific time. So we talk about this every time we talk about this, because Maslow's hierarchy of needs becomes important. But when we talk about some of these things for our children and for people that we're working with, self-actualization, self-esteem, love and belonging, safety, physiological behaviors, all those things that we need to survive, all of these things are part of our basic needs. We know that. So human development obviously does fit in here because we have to fit in somewhere when we're talking about self-actualization, especially in self-esteem, respect for others, respect by others, love and belonging is very important, as well as safety. That's important for us also. And many people, I think, kind of misinterpret some of these, I guess, sections and try and take them kind of out of context. There really isn't. It's not really a triangle. It's not really a step ladder. It's all really together. It's all one big homogenized group that can change at any time. I think that's what becomes important for me to think about as I talk about human development. So human development for me, and some of the research that we do talks about parents and caregivers understanding what to expect. Just as Megan had said, knowing where those developmental lines are can help us when we're maybe talking to a child or trying to figure out what's going on with a teen. What kind of things should we expect from that interaction? So positive human development, we talk about role playing, demonstrate. It goes back down to some of the communication things we've talked about in the past. Active listening, appropriate response, and simplify actions for age. So that's all of our communication. Again, back to being able to understand and communicate well becomes important. So positive human, we're not going to talk too much about abnormal human development, just because that goes off into another realm. It becomes a little bit more difficult. So we're going to focus mostly on positive and normal human development for what we're talking about today here. So human development. So the definition, process by which individuals achieve their potential level of health and well-being. That's an interesting way to put it. But it includes biological, mental, emotional, intellectual, economic, and cultural components, as well as physical. It has basic concepts of biological, cognitive, and social emotional development. Lots of great words, lots of cool things. What does it mean? The reality is humans can develop at a certain level, at a certain stage throughout their lifetime. Defining those stages was something that many people have tried to do. Some successfully, some not successfully. I think that when we talk about human development in general, I think some of those things are fine to have in general, but when we need to know specifics, there is information we can look up for specifics regarding what type of things should a child be doing at this age. From 0 to 1, should they be beginning to walk? Should they be beginning to babble? Should they be beginning to do other activities that will allow them to be more successful in the next stage of development, and then next after. When I think about human development for me, I'm always fascinated because a body shouldn't grow the way it grows. It's just an amazing process physiologically. So for me, when I go to this kind of stages for human development, we have infancy, so neonate, so newborns to 1 year approximately, toddler 1 to 5 years, childhood. We have a couple different areas. It's early childhood and middle childhood, 9 to 11, early is 3 to 8 years old, adolescence, teen, approximately 12 to 18, and adulthood 18 plus. Then we get into some other areas a little bit later when we're talking about aging, those types of things. But for me, human development, those stages, you're talking about taking a child, a newborn that is somewhere between, generally, I think 6 to 8 pounds, and between probably 16 to 21 inches long. And that being is going to develop into something that it can be, 5'8" to 6'10", or 4'8" to 6'10" to 7 foot tall. And just from a physiological standpoint, and from a regeneration standpoint of what happens in the body, it's pretty amazing what goes on. That's not even taking into account the brain changes and brain function, what's going to be occurring. So it's really kind of an amazing process that we look at when we're looking at human development for me. And to try and kind of talk about that in different stages when we're talking about the psychosocial personality development, can be pretty daunting. And so, as I've mentioned, I actually kind of look at what Erickson says. So Erik Erikson, a big researcher also, that's worked in these areas for many years. Obviously he's passed away now, but he started talking about human development with different virtues from different ages. And I've got a whole bunch of different ways that I'm going to show you these information, but one thing I just want to go over really quick is we're talking about from the age of 0, so newborn to 1.5 years old approximately, we talk about trust versus mistrust. We talk about autonomy versus shame, 1.5 to 3, and then initiative versus guilt, from 3 to 5. And you'll see that we have a basic virtue that we are going to talk about also, which is hope and those types of things that are part of that information. So I've got another chart that we'll talk about that a little more clearly. But industry versus inferiority, competency, identity versus role. Talking about fidelity from 12 to 18, intimacy versus isolation and love from 18 to 40 years old, generality versus stagnation, caring from 40 to 65. So there's really pretty amazing things that go on. We're talking about personality development. So this is kind of like my introductory slide to it. This one starts talking about some of the virtues again, going with adding ego versus despair and wisdom, 65 years and older, life reflection kind of things. Stagnation. If we go back to number 1, we'll go back to number 1 and make it a little bit. Trust versus mistrust. Talk about feeding and abandonment from 0 to 1.5. If a child is hungry and you feed that child, some of the theories are that children will grow up and have hope. If that child is not fed at appropriate times and is left without food, what the idea is that that child may lose hope in the future. So going forward from that period of time, they will have some mistrust of others. Same thing with autonomy versus shame and doubt. So toilet, clothing, self, so going to the restroom, toilet, and then using kind of their own ideas, getting an idea of who they are, gives them the will to succeed, as an example. And sometimes that can be changeable. If they have that shame, for example, of not being able to take care of themselves well, that can translate into some negative things also. Initiative versus guilt. Talking about exploring using tools from 3 to 5. Gives them purpose. So if they have purpose, they can actually, the thought is they're more successful going forward also. Industry versus inferiority complex of school sports, playing things, you're going to start being active with others. It should be 11, sorry, it should be 11 there, missed that one. So it'd be 5 to 11 years old. Identity versus role, fidelity to 12 to 18, social relationships, beginning to be part of a group at school. Stage 6, intimacy versus isolation. Kind of the love, 18 to 40, romantic relationships. How does that work for them? The thought is if you don't have that opportunity to have love, it can be a negative part of what you do and cause problems later on in your lifetime. Generosity versus stagnation. Care, work, parenthood. Kind of cool thing. What people do as they get a little bit older. So they have self-care for themselves and others. And then ego, integrity versus despair, wisdom 65 plus. How are you going to survive your latter years? Are you ready for death? So there's lots of cool things that are part of that personality development. This one is kind of a little bit easier to read, I think, and understand. Talk about principal developmental tasks and important influences. Trust versus mistrust, at 0 to 18, develop basic trust or lack of self-confidence. It's probably easier to understand this one. Autonomy versus shame and doubt, 18 to 2 years. Learn self-care and independence or experience shame and doubt capabilities. Initiative versus guilt, 2 to 3 to 6 years. Get more assertive but risk negative consequences. You're going to do things that maybe are not appropriate, that people might not like. So you may have some guilt for things that occur, but as long as it's done in a way that's helpful to you and to your family, everyone's going to experience some negative consequences. And so the guilt should actually be much less than you would expect if it's done correctly. Industry versus inferiority, accomplishment, competence, or failure to master cultural and educational skills. You guys can read the rest of these, 11 through adolescence, except pubertal changes and develop a sense of identity. When we start talking about teens, adulthood, obviously, again, develop close relationships. Adulthood, provide for the next generation. Older adulthood, integrity versus despair. Life for new assessment leads to self-acceptance and wisdom or regret. So again, older adulthood, and hope and faith versus despair. You just self-image, and inevitably the decline is going to happen, and you may have dependent on others. And as an adult, that can be difficult also. So sorry, there's kind of interesting things for me to go through. And so when we talk about what's going on at certain ages, family members will ask me, what happens at a certain age that I can help my child with? Is there something I can do to allow them to be more successful? And one of the things I think is just to understand that there's certain areas developmentally that we are going to follow and flow through. And these are going to be consistent. It's going to be consistently going through and changing also. So I think if you have an idea of what could happen at 2 years to 3 years, there's things that are going to happen, but it may be a negative consequence. We let the child fall instead of putting them in a bubble wrap, which I want to do all the time. I spent 30 years in EMS, so I don't think anybody should do anything. That's just kind of my role for many years. So doing things that are going to be appropriate to their age while allowing them to explore their world in a manner that's going to be safe and allowing them to be, again, able to do things that they would like to do and learn from them becomes important. All right, let's see, one more is, I think. If you look at this, so I'm doing, hopefully I'm trying to lead you kind of through the steps, at least my steps for processing this to understand a little more about human development, at least from one stage, just from Erickson's theory, because there's so many different theories out there. This is one that I've used many times and I'm most familiar with, I believe. But again, infancy, basic trust versus mistrust. Resolution or virtue that you get from that is hope. To be able to, you hope things will happen the way you expect them to. It's a good hope for us to be successful again. Appreciation of independence and relatedness. So that's something we want to do in old age. So this kind of goes in a continuum. So this will be, you know, infancy, this will actually go all the way through to old age and death. So you're going to have that culmination of old age of independency and relatedness. In early childhood, autonomy versus shame, you got that will, acceptable life cycle, integration and disintegration. Play age, again, 3 to 6 years. There's purpose, humor, empathy, resilience. So the idea is if you have an opportunity to be given and learn these areas all along here as part of the Erickson's theory, instead of having, for example, shame, you have autonomy to do things on your own. You have that will to do the things you'd like to in your life, allows you to accept the cycle of life from integration all the way through disintegration. So kind of cool ideas. Hopefully this is not confusing you very much. As I'm doing this, I'm talking out loud, I'm going, maybe this is more confusing than I expected this to be. But hopefully you understand a little more of this as we go through. I'm going to have a little chance for discussion in just a moment. The next slide, we have some information there. But if we take these conflicts in general and say, what can we do to help our children through these areas? Take it one at a time, like how old is your child? 3 to 6 years old. Initiative versus guilt. So what kind of things are you teaching that child to start that would help them as they get a little bit older to feel like they were capable and able to do it? So if they want to draw, want to make something, maybe give them the opportunity to do that right then would be a good way to start. And you got to keep away from some of that possible guilt that could happen after. Let's see. All right, this one's a little bit, hopefully you can see it okay. But this takes just a couple of those in the beginning. So it takes the first 5 and breaks them down a little bit further. So if you haven't understood me yet, this will hopefully give you a little bit of idea of what we're doing when we're talking about this example. So we talk about infancy, just for example, 1 year, trust versus mistrust. If needs are met, infant develops a sense of basic trust. So outward signs of healthy growth, expressions of trust, invest in relationships, open, non-suspicious attitudes, lets mother go. So mother's able to do some things separately from the child. The child knows the mother will come back. The child welcomes touching. There's good eye contact between the child and the family, and shares self and possessions. So they're able to be picked up and give things away because they know the child trusts that it's going to come back. Outward signs of unhealthy growth, expressions of mistrust, avoids relationships, suspicious, flows, guarded, doesn't want the mother to leave, cries every time they go. They're by themselves when they have an opportunity with other children, they're unhappy. Poor eye contact, does not share self or possessions. So as you can see, there's a whole bunch of these that the first 5 we've talked about are here. And I think that when we get asked a lot about is just, for example, adolescence, testing roles, integrating them to form a single identity. So identity versus role confusion for an adolescent. Just some examples here. Expressions of identity, certain about sexual identity, active interest in opposite sex. If there's some confusion for identity, doubts about sex role, and lacks confidence. So again, just a couple things that we can look at that can help us move forward when we're talking about, is my child developing the way I hope they're developing? And obviously talk to your physician, people you work with, you have counselors, whoever it might be, therapists. That's important also, but these are kind of pretty cool things to at least think about and look at things like your preschooler and why am I, or when should I be concerned about that child's ability? What can I do to help that child? And again, something may just be a daily thing, or maybe something that happens for, like I said, once a day, maybe for a child for just a short period of time because of newness or something at a school. But if a child, for example, to a preschooler, we're talking about initiative versus guilt, if that child gets depressed easily and puts self down and slumped posture, poor eye contact, has low energy level, then maybe it's time to go talk to someone else about what's occurring with that child. So again, just for some informational purposes, I think these are helpful. I did include a bunch of the other major theorists of child development, Freud, Montessori, Gassel, Piaget, Erikson, Skinner, Bandura, and Robert Coles. So again, they have a significance in what they did. So if you had interest, you can look up some of those yourself also to get more information about that if you'd like. So it's kind of cool stuff. I know some of these, the parents don't, sometimes people don't like Erikson, people don't like, don't like Freud. So everybody has their ideas of what they can look at. I find that Montessori was one of the ones, obviously Montessori school is what we always think. Give an object to manipulate, I think that's kind of cool. It's an exercise of sensory learning. It's all about being out, being in a huge classroom sometimes and touching everything and building it themselves. So it's good opportunities to learn and see what goes on if you like. And Bandura, that's something that's kind of cool. I thought that was pretty important to look at him too at one point. So, all right, so that was pure, well, that was just a really kind of brief, crazy interaction for human development kind of through the lifespan. Any comments on that? Did I confuse everyone?
I'm waiting to see if someone posts in the chat. Anybody have anything they'd like to say that they'd like me to read?
I'd be like, what in the world was that? Take time to think about it for a minute, and maybe, yeah, if you have a chance to look at it again, it might be interesting to see what you think looking at it again. It's kind of hard to get that from the start, but I'm hoping it gave people an opportunity to see that there are ways to look at, what's our child's development correct? Are we doing things correctly with our child? What are some things we may look at with that child and be able to look at that a little bit differently? If you don't see things that are unusual, then you probably don't really have a child, because every child is unusual in some way. That's what we find. Lots of things that happen that change every day with a child. And I think that's what makes it kind of exciting and also mind-blowing at times to see things that change so quickly. Okay, well, we don't have any there. We're going to go to our peer pressure. Again, a bunch of crazy things with peer pressure for this. Peer pressure is defined as pressure from people your age or social group to behave like them in order to be liked or accepted. Teenagers obviously are highly influenced by peer pressure, but adults also are significantly wielded by peer pressure and influence. So peer pressure is influence wielded by people of the same social group. It's also a term used to describe the effect this influence has on a person to conform in order to be accepted by the group. So we know that's really kind of an amazing process, because many of us want to be accepted and feel part of a group. If we don't, that can be really damaging to us in many ways. And having seen children and that have been on both ends of it, having had children that were not part of the social group that people wanted to be, and having even myself being part of different groups growing up and seeing what happened because of things that we had sometimes no influence over. It was always fascinating to me to see how this works. And so you see peer pressure, American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry has that information for you if you want more information about this. It's kind of a cool website for people to look at. So the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. www.aacap.org for peer pressure. It comes up also. So that's
Hey,
what
Tim.
that is. go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I'll cut in when you're done with that slide.
Okay. I think I'm done with the slide right now. Just
Oh,
this one.
perfect. Shirley and I were at a Communities That Care meeting last week, and talking about protecting kids against, risk factors, specifically drugs and e-cigs and tobacco and things like that, and suicide. And I had this thought come to me, and I actually wrote it down. This is what I wrote down: if you belong, you won't feel the need to try to fit in. And how do we belong? It's all about the family ties, which is what My Discovery Destination is all about. It's getting families to spend time together and strengthening those bonds and having a safe place, and knowing that they're loved and that they belong. And that will help your children resist peer pressure in a negative way. You're going to get peer pressure. There's probably both positive and negative. But when we talk about peer pressure, we usually are referring to the negative side of it.
Correct. Yeah, no, that's true. Good point. I appreciate that. There's, we're going to talk about some of those risk and protective factors, and next week or following week, we're going to talk about that specifically. But peer pressure has really changed a little bit also when we add the internet on top of all the stuff that's going on. We've changed some of that behavior, how things change, what people think, and what influence people have over each other. That's something that's a little difficult for adolescents to understand, or even for, like I said, adults. It's the same thing. We all have that need to be accepted by others, and that's in part of our social group that we're a part of as far as the human race. So we want to try and encourage that, but we also want to be part of something that's not going to be damaging to us. That's what we're finding now. A lot of our adolescents and children and even adults are joining things they shouldn't join because they just feel like they have to be a part of something. And that becomes difficult. When you don't have that connection and you try and make it work, that can be very damaging to yourself, and make it hard for people to accept you and for you to accept yourself. People always talk, well, you have to love yourself first and understand who you are before you can go out and be part of the world. And I kind of believe that, but sometimes we are influenced by our world, so it makes it difficult to know what comes first. And I think that's what we have to be aware of and be alert to when we're talking with others in different areas. So let's go through some of my ideas for this. Peer pressure obviously influences. Oops, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could just comment as well on kind of back to what Megan was saying. And I totally agree. Usually when we're talking about peer pressure, we're looking at the negative side. But I think it's important for us to also remember when we're, in raising kids, that peer pressure can be positive if we're really intentional. I mean, it would be great for us to be intentional in maybe helping our kids, make sure that they are around friends and, and belonging in groups. That can be a positive thing. And the other side of that is remembering that we can be, in order to help create that positive peer pressure, if you will, remember that we can be a caring adult, not just to our children, but to our children's friends and to the youth around us and to the youth in our ward and our youth groups and, the youth that walk by on the sidewalk and we happen to be out there. We can be positive and we can help build them as well. And then, hopefully the other adults in our children's lives will also take on that, that philosophy and be, supporting our children as well. In fact, an experience that comes to mind with that, we go to a lot of CTC meetings in the Davis area. And we were down there actually at an event, and the leader, who is a great friend of ours, we have a lot of respect for her, and she was leading the group, and her daughter had done an art piece for one of the pieces and it really truly was phenomenal. But it was really fun for us as adults to be able to, be really intentional and make sure that we took that opportunity to go to the daughter and, build her up and tell her how amazing it was. And, how we appreciated it. We even, sent it in a card to her. Again, because we know that she's getting that support from her mother, but it's important that it comes from other adults as well. It will have a different impact and a not necessarily more of an impact, because it's not more than a parent's impact, but a different impact to have another adult besides that parent that we know loves us and cares for us, and kind of, we think in our heads, they have to love us, which of course they don't, but but anyway, so it was fun to be able to be another caring adult for the child of someone that we have a lot of respect for. So I think it's important that we look at that side of things as well.
No, that's really true. I do have some slides to talk about that also, because even some of these ideas here, activities you're involved in, music you listen to, those can be positive or negative, right? So the way you dress or wear your hair, some of those things can be appropriate. Some, we start worrying about that. We start talking about even who you date, that can be a positive or negative thing, and who you're friends with. There's all these things that we can do with peer pressure influence that can develop us in a good way or in a negative way. I think that's something to be aware of too. So I think that I did focus a little bit on the negative, and I started doing that. I'm like, there are some positives, so we did put positives in. But just the pressure to act in a certain way can be direct. So we talk about some different ways that peer pressure is put on people: direct, indirect, self-motivating, pressure to fit with the group because of certain standards they've set or comments they've made. So there's things that we do to fit in also, some good and some bad. One of the things I want to put in just real quickly was some of the ways to handle peer pressure. Pursue your own interests. People like things you do, say no. Calmly explain why something's not for you. Don't judge. Respecting people's choice can help respect you and yours. Friends don't have to agree on everything. And the big thing we talk about with anyone, especially what I do, is if there's a situation where you feel threatened or being hurt or feel pressured that you're not really comfortable with, get help. So a family member, from outside a situation, a teacher or a counselor. And just so you know, one of the things that I mention to families often, especially drug and alcohol and stuff that I work with, specifically of suicide, is if someone has a problem, there has to be a way to get that person out of that situation. In our family, I had 4 daughters, and so we said we'd pick them up from anything they went to, any parties, anything that happened, we'd be willing to get them anywhere. We basically stayed up all night. If anybody was out all night, and we were there anyway. So he said, just call us if you need something. And we did have one of our daughters who had some problems a couple of times that we didn't expect. And so we basically had code words that we gave them to do, and haven't been EMS for many years because we came up with our own code words. But we had a code word that my daughter would call, and she said that code word in part of a conversation, because we didn't know who was there, what was happening, if she was being allowed to call, if she texted it, whatever it might be. But we had a code word that allowed us to go get her. We did it for all of our children. We do it for our grandchildren also. If there's something that they need, there's a code word they can text to us, and we will get them without question and without any replications against them. We'll just go get them. So it's something to think about as you go forward to handle that peer pressure too. But getting help and people that you trust, I think, Shelley, that's really important too. We talk about having a trusting adult besides your family that you can go to in case there's a need, because there may be something that happens that the parents may not be there, or something may occur that involve the parents even, and having that other person that's trustworthy and someone that they expect to make the right choices for them or help them with those choices is very important. In types of peer pressure: rejection, threatening to end a relationship, or intentionally leaving someone out, put down, insults, reasoning, reasons why someone should try something, unspoken, feeling pressure about saying something to you, and positive, having a positive influence on your peers. So there are positive things with peer pressure. Here's tips about peer pressure: share with your kids, stay away from peers or pressure to do things that seem wrong or dangerous, and to say no. I want people to try and practice saying no. I hope you all do that with your children. I want you to talk to them and tell them, go through a scenario and say, what do you say? And make them tell you no, and make them do it more than once. If they feel unsafe or uncomfortable, they say no. And that's hard because if things happen that you don't expect to occur. And having worked with people who had been sexually assaulted and who also sexually assaulted others, that becomes very difficult for people, young women especially, young men at times, to be exposed to things they're not expecting at one time becomes very difficult for them to stop. So having them walk through it and modeling that behavior and practicing becomes important. Say no when you can. If problems, peer pressure go up, you gotta get help. Parents can help with peer pressure. Parents need to have honest and open communication. We talked about this already. Talk about them getting assertive to resist getting involved in dangerous or inappropriate situations. Know your child's friends. If they arise, share concerns with their parents. Get to know how your child interacts with friends online with others. Communicate about safe internet, all of this. Help your child develop self-confidence. They feel good about themselves, they're less vulnerable to peer pressure. Develop backup plans, you out dangerous situations, like I said. You always can get them, no questions asked if you feel worried or unsafe. I apologize for going quickly, but I know we're running out of time. So you just go types of peer pressure again. We've got some of these we talked about. Some examples of negative peer pressures include some of these. Identifying someone who is high risk of falling to peer pressure. Just really quickly, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, uncertainty about one's place within a peer group, personal interests, exclusives of one's peer group, don't having those interests, being isolated, lack of direction in life, depression, eating disorders, poor academic abilities or performance. This is an interesting slide because this is something that I saw in work that I did at the university level before. So we know it can happen with people falling into peer pressure. You have the right to resist peer pressure, stand up straight, make eye contact, say how you feel, stick up for yourself. Say no, leave, change the subject, alternatives, suggestions, just to do alone, say you're not allowed, give a reason why you can't. It's a dumb idea, go hang out with someone else. Sounds easy, but we know it's difficult. Positive peer pressure, encourage one to do something that's constructive, results in a good outcome. Helps to build self-confidence and one being pressured, prevents one from doing something that result in a harmful or destructive outcome. It's just something to put on for the kind of values that people can have. We just won't go into a lot this time. Positive peer pressure again. Don't get pushed into something you don't want to do. That's the end of that. Then it's just another resource. You can look up things. The group is doing some really good work. And we have our other conversation stuff. So I'm sure I went through it really quickly, but we're out of time. Anybody have any comments?
And if you want to type them in the chat, I'll be happy to read them.
So I'd say it's actually kind of got kind of excited about doing this presentation because I found a lot of information that I wanted to share. I think maybe a little bit too much information to share at some point happens. So sometimes that's what occurs. So I apologize if it's a little unusual way to present these things, but I'm hoping you have a chance to look at it again and think about what we're talked about and have some good information back from them.
I always enjoy what you share, Tim.
Yeah, and such great information, like you said, to be able to go back and go. I love that these are recorded because we can go back and we can review them. And as things pop up, that we're like, oh, I remember Tim talked about that. We can go back and look at it again. So thank you, Tim.
You're welcome. Thank you guys very much.
Okay, if no one else has any more comments, we'll go ahead and end our recording and we will post the replay. Thank you. And we'll see you next week, Monday. It'll be April 11th at noon.
Very good.
Thank you.
Everybody for coming.
Yep,
So
thank you guys very much.